Welcome into the Train with the Best podcast, a podcast by Fit Pros for Fit Pros. I'm Craig Hoffman, a media and fitness professional.
And I'm Chris Gorres, master trainer and international presenter.
And we're sitting on my couch.
That's right.
Good to see you in person.
I don't know what to do with my hands. I don't know where I'm supposed to look.
You sound like we're on a roller coaster.
There's a lot of,
Remember when the Dolphins and Hard Knocks did that?
That's it, yeah. The touchdown celebration. Against our Commanders, I think, right? Wasn't that against Washington?
I do believe that was against the Commanders. Yeah. I don't know if it's say our Commanders. I mean, I'm a professional. I cover them. As a reporter, allegedly. Well, I used to. Now I'm just a talk show host who blabs his opinions all day. Right. Anyway, the point is, we do a podcast here where we talk about fitness. And Chris, I say that I'm a media professional and a fitness professional, and yet I haven't actually trained anybody in a while. But I guess kind of the purpose of today's podcast is to talk about the fact that I am going to be doing that again.
That's right.
So we're launching a new program at Elevate Interval Fitness in DC in a couple of weeks called Elite Athlete. And it is going to be a supplement, I would say, to the incredible training that goes on there. We've talked about Elevate quite a bit on this podcast, as that is where my wife and I train. She coaches there. And it is a hybrid fitness gym. Primarily, they obviously you get the name, interval fitness is in the name. So a lot of interval training, but really it is designed these days in large part to help folks get ready for Hyrox, which Rachel and I will be running here in DC on March 2nd. The gym's owner is David Magida, who is the reigning North American champion.
Yeah, what's up, Dave?
In Hyrox. And so it's been really amazing to train there and get ready. And I, knock on wood, feel tremendous going into this. And I'm really excited to run this with Rachel, which is hilarious because when she wanted to sign up for it, I was like, this is a terrible idea. So I think what's been cool, though, in being a part of that world, Chris, is like looking at how the things that we've done and the things that I've learned from you over the years and kind of the high performance space are, I don't want to say missing, but are not available in that world. To an extent, I think missing is fair, but I want to be really careful how I phrase this, not just to be nice to people who I like a lot. But it's a matter of kind of structure and the fact that a lot of this is happening in like a group fitness setting versus like the way David or Meg Jacoby or Lauren Weeks or some of the best athletes in the sport, men and women, are training on their own, right? What is needed for the masses is different than what is needed for the high level athlete. And folks that have been doing this for a while. I mean, Hyrox is still a very young sport. So I was actually listening to a podcast with Lauren Weeks today on it that came out a couple weeks ago. And one of the hosts was like, I don't know that there's anybody in the sport, even at the highest levels, that is like, I owned this yet. Like so often, because the hybrid racing is so varied, there's running, there's skiing, there's rowing, there's heavyweight stuff, there's super cardiovascular stuff that people were coming to it from their backgrounds.
Right.
And
Exactly.
We're now just getting to the point where there is actual athletes at the highest level that are masters at all those and are maybe even ready for this kind of training. And obviously Elevate's journey has followed that. And so it's a really cool time to come in and I think we're going to have some of the athletes there that have made the podiums and things like that are going to be taking this program. But I want to talk about kind of, and I think this is good for a general, like almost reset of the podcast in some ways, almost 8 years into it, of like what it is that we think on a principled level and how those things can apply to a sport like Hyrox.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on a lot of points there about.
I did talk for a long time.
Yeah. Jesus, give somebody else a chance to talk.
I know, you're sitting right here.
Oh my God. No, you touched on a lot of points. I think obviously, when we're trying to train for an athlete or we're trying to train for a professional athlete, a professional sport, there is a lot of structure that goes into that. But I think also just the understanding and maybe the misunderstanding of what makes an athlete truly special. And sometimes the thinking is that because these guys are so big and strong and fast, that's what makes them as special, is that they're big and strong and fast. And that's not really the case. Yes, they are big and strong and fast, but they're not using maximum power every time that they're going out there to run or to jump or do anything else, right? Like we talked about Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and how they're always on balance. They're never off balance on the basketball court. Everything that they do is super efficient, right? When you think about a golfer or a boxer, the guys that throw the hardest punches or hit the longest drives, they're not necessarily the strongest person that's out there on tour. They just hit the ball extremely well. They throw their punches extremely well. There's no wasted movement, no wasted motion, no wasted energy. And what you touched on was really interesting because I think of MMA. When MMA first started and they started mixing different disciplines of martial arts, and people were coming from wrestling and people were coming from jiu-jitsu and people were coming from taekwondo or whatever they were coming from, or boxing, it was very sloppy at first, and nobody looks like what they look like now. And now if you look at MMA fighters, they are all generally the same. Some might be better at striking, some might be better at groundwork, but it's not like you had this wide variance like you did when the sport first began.
Right. It's not like it was truly mixed martial arts when it started. It was like, let's have a karate specialist fight a wrestler and see what happens.
And that's what you're seeing at Hyrox. Like, how does a rower do against...
How does someone who's done CrossFit their whole life go against someone who's a marathoner versus someone who is a power lifter that got into running?
Exactly. So
that's literally what the sport is right now.
Right now. It's in its infancy. It's going to grow. And going back to what makes an athlete special is that efficiency. Right? When you see somebody who is an athlete, we're going to go to the combine next week, and they're going to see how fluid the athletes look in the drills. Right. It's not that they can do the drills. It's how fluid do they look? How much effort are they actually putting into turning their hips, recognizing the play, reading a ball in the air, throwing to this or that, right? Like, how fluid did Patrick Mahomes look on the last drive of the Super Bowl, right? Like, those are all things that you look at and you're like, that's smooth, that looks effortless, right? And then eventually, if when you do the sport enough and you have the reps into it and you structure the workouts, you hopefully get to that point where I can do these things and it's not as rigid anymore. It doesn't look like a robot that's doing these things with a ton of effort. It looks like an athlete that's doing this with a rhythm and a fluidity to it.
No, for sure. I've told this story on the pod before, and I told it probably the first time the day that it happened, because I was down in Tampa with Yo Murphy, great friend of ours who we'll get to see in Indianapolis at the Combine next week, one of the elite high-performance coaches in the entire world. And Yo was double coaching a session. Mm-hmm. And J.J. Wilcox, former NFL safety, was one of the athletes, and Kyle Schwarber, still current. This is like 5 years ago, after he was fresh off of his MVP performance in the World Series with the Cubs. But Schwarber, or whatever that season was with the Cubs when he kind of broke out. But Schwarber is one athlete, and J.J. Wilcox is the other. And these two, J.J. was a big safety. That dude, I covered him when he was with the Cowboys. Just a rock solid hitter, big power athlete, and they're doing these little hops. Both of them, these small, like tiny movements, little hops onto pads and off, like stick the landing. It's barefoot training. It's talking about that efficiency of movement, not wasting motion, which has this great double benefit of maximum performance, but also minimal injury risk. And so that is another side, and it's always fun to talk about because you can talk about it really either way, and it's the same stuff accomplishes both. You see people's eyes be like, oh, that's good. I can do better and not get hurt. Like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
So I think that efficiency element is going to be huge in what we do and movement quality. And that's why we're going to limit this program specifically to, speaking to what I'm going to be doing is like, we're not going to have 20 people in the room because I can't keep eyes on 20 people at the level that, to call it something elite, to actually really coach that at that level. Like, we can do that with 6. We can't do that with 20. Right. And so that's the other part of this is like, I appreciate David being willing to do this, and Eric and Jamel, the team over at Elevate, because it is something that's a little bit different. It is something that is outside of the group setting, but I also hope that everybody, whether you're listening to this because, you are interested in the program, or if you're thinking about doing something like this in your own gym, or you're a fitness enthusiast who's trying to find something like this, like if you really want to train at this level, there is an exclusivity to it. It's just inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something we've talked about, by the way, recently with you and kind of what you're dealing with at the schools.
Yeah. I mean, there are things that we can do that, and things that you should do in a large group where we all just have to push, right? Like,
Right.
hey, we got to get in here. We got to put the effort in. We've got to redline our bodies. Let's find some movements, some exercises, some lifts, some workouts where, hey, this is all about effort. Give me the effort that it takes to, create the adaptations that we want. And then there are workouts when we're trying to refine everything, and that's not necessarily about effort, but efficiency. Are we moving the right way? Are we mobilizing where we're supposed to be mobile? Are we stabilizing where we're supposed to be stable? Are we creating, again, that rhythm, that coordination where everything is smooth and we move as one muscle and not separate muscles, right? That's why we don't like doing lower body, upper body splits. We know that we want to connect power from the tips of our toes to the tips of our fingers. So, these are sessions where, yeah, it's going to take a little bit more instruction, a little bit more coaching, a little bit more attention to detail. But that's what it takes to get to that next level if you want to eventually be a high performer in whatever field it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's kind of the point here is this is meant to take people who have been doing this training for a long time and say like, all right, you're starting to maybe stagnate a little bit. Like, this stuff is still going to be important to you. Steph Curry and LeBron James don't not go to basketball practice anymore.
Of course.
But there's things that they're doing. If they just went to basketball practice, they wouldn't be as good at basketball players. They wouldn't be as good of athletes.
Right.
And I think that's something that I've thought about a lot. I actually sat down. It hasn't come out yet, but a while ago with my friend Alex Shabo, who is another coach at Elevate and also is a writer of the Hybrid newsletter. If you're into the hybrid sports and specifically Hyrox, you gotta follow and subscribe to that newsletter. It's a must read every single week. But Shabo was talking to me about it, and I was like, I come at this not only as someone who is a performance coach, but someone who covers professional sports. And like, I think for Hyrox as a sport, like there's almost this larger topic, but like first there's Hyrox kind of the workouts like that Rachel and I are going to do. Right. And then there's Hyrox like that David does. Like there's these big events. Yeah. It's the Boston Marathon is great for the thousands of people that do it, but it's different for Eliud Kipchoge when he runs it. Right. Yeah. So at this point, we're talking about people who are trying to compete for podiums, not just someone who's trying to finish the race. Right. But for those people, if that's your sport, right, it is, you have practice and you have training. And that is a big difference. And like, if you want to take it, strength and conditioning, if you will, like your practice is going to wind up being a lot of your conditioning. And then like at times, I think to really maximize your potential, and this is what the goal is with this program, for instance, is to like say, all right, today we're not working on practicing Hyrox. Today we're working on getting stronger, getting faster, getting more powerful, becoming more efficient as athletes and movers. Right.
Yeah. I think at some point, more is not more. Right. Like when you start out, if you're just a novice level athlete, or if you're just somebody getting into Hyrox and you haven't done this before, doing more is going to be beneficial for you. The more that you do, the better that is.
Yeah, but then, that's me, right? I had never done this stuff before, and to get fit enough to do Hyrox, the most important workouts I've done the last 10 months are the stuff that at Elevate, not the stuff that I program for myself.
Right. But now, let's say you've done that for a few months, or you've done it for a year, and now you want to get to the next level. Now, more is not always more, because there's only so much that your body can take before you're going to start to beat it down.
Well, and also there's a diminishing returns.
The diminishing returns, right? And also, like once you've gained what you can gain out of that, now you have to gain it from somewhere else, right? So whether it be finding the ways to mobilize or create more ankle mobility, create more ankle stiffness, right? Like finding that balance of the plyometrics that you have to do, being able to produce more power, more acceleration, all of those things. How do you do when you're pushing a sled versus when you're just running on your own, right? Those are all things that, when we say doing more isn't just more. Doing more might also mean doing the exact same amount, but with less effort, right? So like, all right, I can do this, but now I don't.
Yeah, let's get into that on the principle level for a second, because I think this is something that we've talked about that is like kind of a wow moment for a lot of people, right?
Right.
The idea that like, how does like getting stronger? Because I can see someone being like, look, I hear you. Like I know getting stronger is probably good for me, but like I have to do this thing for, if you're elite, you're doing it for an hour. But if you're most people, even if you're fighting for podiums that's not in the elite 15, like you're talking hour 10, hour 20, hour 30 minute, like you got to be able to grind. You got to learn how to do that. So why is getting stronger going to help me? What's your response to that?
Well, getting stronger is the foundation for everything that we're going to do, right? Because the strength is that foundation that we can build upon, because we can turn that into speed, we can turn that into power, we can turn that into endurance, we can turn that into whatever we want. So if you're somebody who's not strong, the first thing you have to do is get strong, right? Before we start talking about anything else, before we start talking about like mobility and stretching, well, you have to have muscles to stretch before we start stretching, right? So it's like the reason why you're getting injured is not because you're not mobile enough. It's because you don't have the resiliency and the tolerance and the strength in your muscles to be able to make it through these workouts without breaking down. So you have to get strong first, right? Like if I'm building a car, I have to have an engine. I can't get there with the best suspension system, with the best braking system, and then run that race with a terrible engine. I have to have an engine first. That doesn't mean that all the stuff that is in addition to that doesn't matter, but without that engine, without strength, we're not going anywhere. So you have to build the strength first. And that's what we're talking about. Like, what's the next level? Okay, once you are strong, the next level to that is how do we calibrate that strength into, refining that into making strength smooth, making strength effortless, making strength powerful, right?
Once the car runs, how do we make it run well? How do we make sure that it stops? How do we make sure that the suspension is good? It's funny you mentioned the engine, because that, for some reason, that is like the phrase du jour in the hybrid world.
Yeah.
Is everyone talks about through the lens of like endurance, building a bigger engine. And like, there is something to that. And 100%, like for me, again, I this is not pushing back against that in any way, because that's what I needed as someone who wasn't an endurance
you got to
athlete.
get strong.
I had to build that up, but there's also something to building like a stronger engine, if you will. Like what happens if that engine is capable of more horsepower, like not just to run like I think a lot of people, I've been trying to do this. I'm not a car person, so if I screw this up, then I'm just outing myself as not a car person, which I already told you. But I feel like a lot of the Hyrox world, a lot of athletes work on like fuel economy, not building more horsepower.
Yes.
And like if the goal is to get there, fuel economy is really important. You can't run out of gas.
Sure.
And that is super duper duper important. But eventually, like, is it worth squeezing out 1 more mile per gallon or adding a ton of horsepower to that engine so your car doesn't have to run as long to begin with?
Yeah, but see here's where people get confused, right? Improving fuel economy is the goal. Improving fuel economy is not the process. There's a huge difference between what we're doing to achieve a goal versus like the goal itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like I had a conversation the other day with one of my kids about like lifting weights, and it's like, hey, like the goal is not to lift weights. Lifting weights is the process. Strength training is the goal. Right? So don't confuse the goal sometimes with the process. So if my goal is to run a mile faster, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to run a mile over and over and over again, right? Sometimes I'm going to run half a mile as fast as I can. Sometimes I'm going to run 2 miles to build that base, right? So I train above it, I train below it. We've always talked about that. Wherever our target is, reach above it, reach below it. And then that's what helps us right there in that sweet spot. But yeah, sometimes we talk about this with the beep test with so many of the soccer players. It's like, I got to get better at the beep test, so I'm just going to run the beep test over and over again. That's a great way to not get better at the beep test.
Right.
You know?
There's no progressive overload there.
Right.
I actually, in the podcast I listened to with Meg Jacoby the other day, she talked about how she's really enjoyed implementing some CrossFit workouts, like 15 to 20 minute, like hard intensity. And, she's like, she called it her like high performance engine. She's like, you need your grind engine, your high performance engine. And I was like, I see what she's saying, and again, I'm not gonna beat the hell out of this analogy here, but like what you're really doing, non-analogy version, is like you're pushing yourself harder in a very similar style of workout. You're probably lifting more, going faster, and like you're all of a sudden getting some progressive overload, which is going to be the fundamental way to improve at anything.
Right.
And so whether it's longer, faster, stronger, heavier, like if you just do the same thing over and over again, you're not actually going to improve. And then it's kind of within the elite athlete program that we're going to do is like taking that to I don't want to say an extreme place because we're smart and we're safe, but like to more of a maximalist type of thing where we very much keep the main thing. And it's like in this block right now, we are focused on this attribute and we're going to sharpen that edge, sharpen that knife or sharpen that tool as sharp as we possibly can. And then we're going to put it down and we're going to go over here and we're going to sharpen that tool. And all of a sudden by the end of the program, you have a much sharper tool belt or a tool belt full of much sharper tools.
We just said sharp like 20 times in the last 10 seconds. I love it.
That was kind of the point of that.
Yeah, we're sharp. We are sharp. But like that is the point, right? Like we got to get done what we need to get done, and we got to get it done right away, right? And sharp is a great word to say that, right? So when you got to get out there and you got to compete, you got to hit the nail on the head. You got to be sharp. You got to be precise. Whatever it is that you want to say, but when you're going out there to compete, it's no longer the workout now, right? Like we've got to prepare for it so that by the time we get there, you just let loose and you let go,
right?
And that's why I think some people don't disconnect the two. They think that because this is the race, this is how we have to train, and that's not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been interesting, again, listening to some of these podcasts, some of the elites, like, I think Lauren Weeks has one of the least specialized workout plans in terms of Hyrox. She only does like 2 Hyrox style workouts per week, and she is, I think, currently the world record holder. Yeah. So, that idea of like, let's get better at the things that make you good at Hyrox as opposed to just practicing Hyrox. Now that said, she's still doing 2 a week. And if you're just getting started in this world, like there is something too. And I think like for David, this is his superpower. Like that dude grinds like nobody I've ever met. And like the ability to grind out a race ultimately is going to matter. Like, can you go to the pain cave? Can you go there? You have to train yourself mentally, physically for that, but it can't be everything. And so, if you're in the DC area and you're interested, definitely hit us up. There's links all over the place, including our website, trainwiththebest21.com, to get in touch with me. And obviously you can email Elevate as well. And, we'll hopefully take some of our athletes that have been doing so well, but are ready for that next thing. Because the other thing too, Chris, is like, these things unlock each other.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes.
Like if you plateau, that doesn't mean you're plateaued in that area forever.
Right.
You go over here, you unlock a new door, you come back, and now you've got more capacity, and now you can go back to the stuff that you were doing before, and you'll be able to do it even better.
Right. It all goes back to the adaptation principle, right? Like sooner or later, your body adapts. So whatever stress that you're giving your body adapts to that stress, and that's no longer stressful. So you have to find some sort of new stress, some sort of new stimulus to create the adaptations that you want, and then you can go back to that later on, and you'll get the results that you were getting before. But that's how plateaus happen. It loses its efficiency or efficacy.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really looking forward to this. I mean, I'm looking forward to this specific program and some of the people that have already expressed interest, and like it's going to be a heck of a group to work with, and I'm really excited about it. But I'm also just excited to coach again, man. I've missed it so much.
Yeah. Coaching is fun. I will say, like, that's something that I'll never.
I don't want to say you pulled yourself back like too much, because you were always in it, but like
I'm always in it. Like I'm never.
You did take a moment where you were doing more like administrative, like I'm the CEO of the company, and then you're like, no, I'm coaching.
It's a whole nother podcast episode, or maybe a whole nother podcast in general, just talking about the business development of a coach, because like what I love doing is coaching. Right. That's great. I can be a great coach, but when you're building a business, it's you have to step away from coaching.
You do still own the company.
Yeah.
So that's pretty important.
Yes.
So that's the news. That's the stuff. Those are the things. Other than that, anything else we want to?
No, we're good. Really excited for our talk with Dr. O tomorrow. So make sure you are, if you're listening, make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you like this and
chances are this is going to get published out of order. So go back and listen to the episode with Dr. O that we're recording tomorrow. Time travel. Ooh. You want to close out on the roller coaster?
Here we go.
Hey. Subscribe.